Hi guys, if you understand anything about Tory MPs and ministers, their primary modus operandi is to blame others for their own failings. Never take responsibility. And if you're eventually forced to apologise, make it an apology about something failing, not you. Michael Gove, who I've described before as one of the slimiest of Tories, a man who will mix fact with fiction in order to trick the public, was giving evidence at the COVID inquiry. He tried to sell the idea that the SNP didn't want to work with his boss Boris Johnson to the best of their ability due to political posturing. Have a listen to this.
For people who believe in Scotland's constitutional future as an independent nation, supporters of the SNP and other parties and organisations aligned behind independence, it is necessary to prove that the United Kingdom is a dysfunctional entity. And therefore the SNP and its supporters will often, when dealing with a situation that is not perfect, say, it's a failure. This is a proof that the UK, as a constitutional entity, is broken. As I say, the differences of opinion that occurred between the UK government and the Scottish government on day-to-day management of the pandemic were no greater than differences between the Federal Chancellery in Germany and the Länder in Germany, or between the Élysée in France and the respective regional administrators. But while I have great respect for the integrity and professionalism of Scottish Government ministers when it came to the handling of individual pandemic choices, we have to bear in mind that the political aim of the SNP is to destroy the United Kingdom. And from time to time, they will make political points to that end.
What an absolute charlatan. I'm literally shaking here listening to this. I said before, a charlatan, a slimy individual, mixing fact with fiction in order to trick the public into his thinking. Now, what are the facts? The SNP want independence, yes. They see the UK as dysfunctional, yes. Is the UK dysfunctional? It is dysfunctional. During the pandemic, it was dysfunctional. Boris Johnson was going in one direction, and the devolved administrations were going in a different direction. And I'm not just talking about Scotland, Northern Ireland, and Wales to a certain extent. So Boris Johnson was ignoring calls from Mark Drakeford, the First Minister of Wales, and Nicola Sturgeon, the First Minister of Scotland, to have meetings at the beginning of the pandemic. We need to have a meeting with you. And Boris Johnson ignored them. That's dysfunctional. How is that functional? And this idea, yeah, I have respect for these people. No, you don't have any respect for them. It was completely dysfunctional. These people don't care. And Boris Johnson, of course, didn't care about the public. It was always about blaming someone else. At the beginning of the pandemic, blaming the public. Blaming Whitehall. When Boris Johnson was having his parties, it was always somebody else's fault. Oh, I didn't receive the information correctly, or I didn't know. Of course, that's blaming someone else, never taking responsibility. And now, when it's all come out that, yes, you were in charge and you didn't do your job correctly, who is he blaming? The SNP. Why? Well, because, think about it, the SNP want to destroy the United Kingdom. They want to present the United Kingdom as dysfunctional. Yes, of course the SNP want independence. Of course they are against Westminster. But they understood during the pandemic we need to work with Westminster. And Nicola Sturgeon tried to work with Boris Johnson. Boris Johnson was in charge. He was the Prime Minister. She was the First Minister. She couldn't force Boris Johnson to do things. He was at the top. It was his scope. He was supposed to be one taking charge of the situation, and he didn't. And you can look at the outcome in Scotland. Did Scotland do everything correct? Of course they didn't. No government around the world took a perfect approach to this. But if you're to compare what happened in Scotland and Wales to England, to Westminster, it's completely different. What Michael Gove was trying to suggest is the individual decisions on a daily basis were pretty much the same. No, they were not. We can see it. We can see the decisions that were being taken by the SNP government in Scotland, and then Westminster following that. Boris Johnson refused to go into lockdowns. Boris Johnson refused to wear a mask most of the time. until he was forced. The Tories were more concerned with holding on to support of their backbenchers and their supporters in the country than they were about dealing with the pandemic. We saw it, and we saw the results of that. But this guy is a charlatan, we already know that. But the main thing here, it's always about blaming someone else, no matter what the problem. Let me know in the comment section, guys, what you think. As always, your comments are greatly appreciated. Thanks a lot.